All right. Hello, treehousers. Let me just make sure. Cool. All right. Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. It is the 27th of April. It is a Monday, just in case you are like me and the days are starting to run together just a little bit. We are going to keep working on the home automation app. But before we get to that, for anyone that's new to our Treehouse family, welcome. Anyone who's been a member of the Treehouse family for a long time, glad to have you back. For those of you that don't know what Treehouse is an awesome place to learn how to design, how to code. We're really beginner friendly. That's where we really aim, is to really help people who are trying to learn code, who've never learned code before. Same thing for design, to be able to jump in and start tackling some awesome code and design projects. So check us out at teamtreehouse.com. So we're going to jump in to our home automation app. We're kind of starting to make the transition today from design to code. So I'm going to kind of talk about what that transition is, how I approach it, and it's going to be a little bit different because obviously I am the designer and developer, so the handoff is a little easy because I already know what I designed, so it's a little easier for me to then build it. And if you are on like a big design team or even like a design firm that's designing something for a client, the handoff is going to be definitely different. So we're going to kind of do it at a simple level, and this is essentially how I would suggest doing personal projects, which if you don't do personal projects, start. Personal projects are what make not only your portfolio awesome, but every time you tackle a personal project, you usually learn a lot more, because we all like, to throw on little challenges for ourselves. And even if you don't, you try to give yourself like an easy run of the mill personal project, you're still going to learn something, whether it's just how to code or design faster. You just get faster at working in, XD or Figma, Sketch, whatever you're doing, or working in Visual Studio or Atom, whatever your code editor is. You're going to learn something more every time. So going through, and if you like doing the design, go for it. Even if you don't like doing the design, it does help as a coder to do design. And same thing for a designer to learn a little bit of code. Just so that you know the language, right? You can speak each other's language, you can talk to each other, you can communicate. Makes it a little bit easier. But by no means is it a requirement to be an awesome developer or an awesome designer. Sorry, grab a drink. So, anyways, our home automation app recap for those of you that might be joining us that haven't seen the other videos. We are designing a home automation app. It's going to have 4 features. One is weather, which you can see in the top left. The next one is calendar events, which you can see in the top right. Then grocery list, which is in the bottom left, and to do, which is in the bottom right. So we finished up the layout of items a couple weeks ago, and then last week we worked on, or 2 weeks ago, we worked on the font and we worked on color. So this is the finalized font and color that I'm going to go with. And there is one tiny little mistake on this page. If your eyes went right to it and you found it, awesome. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. Your design eyes, or design goggles, as I like to call it, get better the more that you work with design and the more that you look at design, which should be every day. But there is one small little thing here, so I'm gonna give you all a few seconds to look at the design. Let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit closer too. I don't want to be too close. Let me collapse that. There we go. That way it's more full screen-ish. Give you a few seconds to see if you see it. All right, so if you were shouting out in chat our little plus box here that it's looking a little weird, you would be correct. So if I zoom in nice and tight here, you can actually see that it's this box plus the icon of a checkbox. So what happened here is I was creating this lovely checkbox, and it is just the way that this is working. I can't get it to be the right size where it's going to perfectly fit over the other box. So I kind of left it. But if you caught that little thing, you were like, something weird over there is happening. Just put it back. Then, good eyes. I just wanted to give you all a little design goggles test and see if you noticed. But otherwise, we have our finalized design. We have our weather section up here in the top left with our precipitation, our wind, and the next couple days. We have two cards. This is typically called a card in design. They're kind of self-contained pieces, and usually when you have a card, they have kind of like blog posts when you see like the summaries, like on Medium is a popular place where people, read blog articles right now. Those are typically called cards, where it's kind of like the same information, and you're going to be repeating them multiple times. So we have those here. And then for our grocery store and our to-do apps, we have these lists and an icon here that's going to be how you add items to the list by clicking on the icon. Of course, to-do list has our check boxes so that you can check them off and mark them complete. But that's with our final design. So I do have this file. It looks just like what I have here, so I'll zoom out. It has the information we started with at the very beginning, and it has the design here on the right. So if anyone wants to play around with this design, change it, make it your own, have fun with it. I mean, that's the whole point of design, right? What I design is going to be different than what you design, and the colors that I choose are probably going to be different than the colors that you choose, and that's what makes design fun and interactive. And it makes being on a team of designers a lot of fun, because then you get a lot of feedback, you get a lot of different points of view, and it really helps you to make yourself a better designer when you get that constant feedback and things like that. So if you want the design file, just reach out in if you can reach out in chat, and then you can sorry, my mind just totally blanked. If you reach out in chat, we can send y'all the link to this file so that you can play with it to your heart's content. And it is its own file. Don't worry about, if it will mess up mine or anything. It's its own file, so you can play with it to your heart's content. So now with the design done, what do we do, right? What do you do from here? So moving on to the development stage, the building stage of this app, one thing that a lot of people like to do, and it's something I don't like to do, but it's totally everyone's preference, is jumping straight into the code, just going from here and now coding. I like to do a couple steps in between. Not only does it help me wrap my brain around what I'm building, but sometimes I catch things too, where I might forget something that, is not on the design side, but will need to be in the app itself. So one of the first things I did was diagram this app and what it's looking like. So I'm going to pull that up. Yep, I'm going to do this first. So I have just the title, and then we have here the main file. So I've worked mostly in Node.js and in Python, and we're going to be building this in Python. And so usually the convention is to start with a file called either application or app. And so that's going to be what starts the program with. That's the file that you run that will make everything go. So I have that there, but then I didn't want to just fill one file with a ton of code when I felt like it would probably be better to read for someone else that might be looking at my code if it's a little bit more broken up, and that does help with readability. And so I broke it up into the 4 sections that we have in our design. So the same 4 sections. So I have, and let me zoom in, make sure. Keep going in. I'm going to check it on what y'all can see. I don't need that. Okay. Ooh, and I can close that too. Okay, awesome. That way I can make it nice and big. Sorry, I'm looking at the other screen to make sure it's nice and big for everyone. I'll go a little bit bigger too. Okay, there we go. That's a lot easier to read. So like I said, I have my app that's going to run the program, but I'm going to break up the 4 pieces into their own files just to help make it easier to read. And also, if I need to go fix something and I know it's broken with the weather stuff, I can go right to the file that says weather instead of going to the app file and then scrolling through a whole bunch of code till I find my weather stuff. So it makes it a lot easier to fix things, makes it a lot easier to read. And another thing to think about is you coming back to this project in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years, the longer you are away from a project, it's almost like somebody else wrote that project and you didn't touch it at all. Because if you don't spend the time to really organize it well, add in some code comments and things like that, coming back to your own code later looks like somebody else wrote it entirely. It's really hard to read. It's really hard to remember where things are. So the more time you spend at the beginning organizing and thinking through how this is going to be, how it's going to work, is going to make your code in the long run so much easier for not only other people to read, which is important, but also yourself. Because trust me, you will come back to a project, one of your first coding projects later, and you'll be like, what was I thinking? What is this? I have no idea what I wrote. Happens to everyone. So take the few minutes to diagram it out, whether it's on paper or, on a website, and it'll definitely help in the long run, I promise. So then I broke it up: weather, calendar, grocery list, and to do. So then scrolling down, we'll focus just on weather, just so we do one at a time. So for weather, I'm going to use an API, which is essentially I'm going to send a call out to a website, to a server, and I'm going to say, hey, I need information on this location, on the weather for today and the next 3 days. And it's going to go, okay, and it's going to send me that information back. And then once we have the information, we need to, of course, display it in our app. So hopefully pretty simple. Next, we have our calendar, which I'm probably going to use Google Calendar. So I need to get info from Google Calendar's API for just today's events. So then, once again, I need to call out to Google Calendar and I need to say, hey, I need the events for today for this person's calendar. And if my info is all correct, it goes cool, and it sends me the info I need. And then I just need to take that info and display it to the screen. And then, of course, we have, are you planning? Yes, I'm going to be using Python for this. Thank you, Matthew, for that question. Next, we, of course, have a grocery list. So I'm going to need a list to hold items, and the info I'm going to need, the item name and the description. So it's probably going to be a list of items, and each item is probably going to be a dictionary where it's going to have a key that says, item name, and then the name of the item, and a key that says description, and then my description. And now we have CRUD. And if any of you remember what CRUD means, we talked about it, I think, at the start of this project. So it's been a while, so if you forgot, don't worry. CRUD is a really popular term. It's just an acronym for essentially working with things that are going to have a database. So CRUD means create, read, update, and delete. So for each grocery store item, we're going to need to be able to create a new one. We're going to need to be able to read it, see the information, read it, update it. So if, say, I put in that I need Jif peanut butter, and then I go, oh, I need to make sure I specify the big Jif peanut butter because we have a dog, and like most dogs, she loves peanut butter, so we use it for treats and things all the time. And then, of course, the last one is delete. So when the grocery shopping's done, we need to be able to delete these items so that it's not just growing and growing and growing this database, because that would be huge, and over time that would make getting data and things like that really difficult because our database would just be ginormous. And then, of course, the last thing on all of these steps is displaying the information, because that's the goal, is to display it on the app. So then the last thing I have here is, of course, our to-do, and it's going to be very similar to our grocery list because it's essentially almost the exact same thing. So same thing, list of to-dos, a dictionary of the information, task name, and then the room or location. And then, of course, same thing, we need to be able to add new to-do items with create. We need to be able to read them so we can see the information. We need to be able to update them in case something's been changed or you need to be more specific or something like that. And then, of course, delete them when you're all done. And then display them out to the screen. So this is, I'm going to zoom back out so we can see kind of our whole diagram here. So you can see this is really simple. I didn't go into the nitty gritty details where I'm like, all right, this is the place I'm going to get, this is the website for the API, and this is what I'm going to do with this and that. And I didn't get really specific. I did it really high level. But this just helps me think about the organization of my project. And it also kind of makes it like its own to-do / checkoff list where I can go through and I can be like, all right, I did that. Info's displayed. Okay, weather's done. I got the info from the calendar. I figured out how to display it. Calendar's done. So it kind of makes its own checklist too, which can be really helpful. And also, while going through this, I thought of 2 things that I'm going to add here just so I don't forget about them. I'm going to put them in ovals. That's fine. I'm going to put them kind of up here because they're going to be in their own space. So, of course, because of the grocery list and the to-do item, let me see if I can zoom in here. I'm going to need a database. So I'm going to need a database, and I'm just going to keep it a local database because at most I might have, maybe 20. I feel like that's still a lot, specific grocery list items I need to get. And same thing for to-dos. I feel like, maybe 20. So it's not going to be like a huge database that I'm going to need to store it like on its own server because it's just going to be so huge and it's going to slow down my program. So our database is going to be pretty small. So I'm just going to keep it local and with the app. So I need to remember to have my database. The other thing that is really important when working with your APIs, so I'm just going to call it keys. But with every API that you work with, you get like a special secret key. And this key is so the API, so say Google, knows, hey, this is Megan asking for this information. And so it tags it to a specific person. That way, if you do something like start calling Google Calendar like 1,000 times every second, they can go, that's not cool, and shut you down. So the keys are not only to make sure that it knows who's asking for the information, but it's also a protection for APIs like Google Calendar and things like that. So they can protect themselves and, of course, protect all of us that use Google Calendar and other things from having a site go down because someone's just like sending constant calls. So that's an important one to make sure that we have. And your keys are going to be kept secret. They're secret keys. I'll even change this. Get that out of the way. Because for that same reason, you don't want to give anyone your API key because one, it's specific to you. And two, if someone uses your API key to do something bad, the person who gets in trouble is you because it's attached to your name. So API keys should always be secret. That means they should never be on your GitHub. So if you ever accidentally push something to GitHub and your API key is in it, most places have where you can delete that key and get a new one and make sure you remove it from GitHub. But if you ever do it, it's okay. Just make sure and go to, Google Calendar API or whichever one you're working with, and delete or refresh so that you get a new key. Can you link the to-do to the calendar? That is possible. That's a good question. So linking the to-dos to the calendar. So essentially what I'm thinking that you're thinking of is if one of my to-dos is like Saturday at 3 p.m. I need to, or Saturday at 1:30 I need to clean the dining room table before D&D because that is actually what we do on Saturdays. But yeah, that's a good point. I think for right now, I'm not going to link it because the idea is to have to-dos that are, let me zoom out so we can see our whole thing here. Oops, almost. The idea is to have the to-dos more as like daily to-dos, so it's only things for today. But that is a good point. That is a feature that you could do, is you could say you add a to-do and link it to a specific day and it creates a calendar event for it too. So it's absolutely something that you could do. And I like that idea. I'm going to keep it more of just like today's daily events, but that's a really good feature. Okay. So we have our design, we have our diagrams, we've thought through everything. The next thing that I like to do is kind of create tasks for myself. And I modeled a way that a lot of people recommend to write these tasks. So I'm going to show you what that looks like now. So I'm using Trello, which I like to use for these kind of simple boards, Kanban boards. So you can do to-do, doing, done. Makes it pretty easy. And you can see I have a little information on each of these. So what you do and what they recommend, this is essentially breaking out our app into specific to-do items and pieces. So you can see I have 4 to match. Same thing. I'm trying to keep it, same 4 so it all kind of sticks together. So our same 4: weather, calendar, grocery list, and to-do. So on the developer side, you may not always know information like the persona, who the user is, why you're building this feature. And so this is a technique that is used to kind of help give the developer a little more context around the feature and why they're adding it, as opposed to just being like weather API and then like do this, this, and that. It makes it a little bit more personable and gives a little more reason behind each step. So I made some simple ones as Danny. Danny is my husband. So if anyone's like, who's this Danny person? It's my husband. So as Danny, I want to see the daily weather so I can be prepared. So essentially you say as your persona. Most of the time, you might have like a persona name, like Danny or Megan or whatever. Other times you may not. So you may just say like as a user, I want to see the daily weather so I can be prepared. So essentially you say as your persona name or as a user, I want to blank so I can blank. So again, as a user, I want to blank so I can blank. And it just helps create more context around why you're doing these different things. So for example, I have the weather one, and then we have I want to see what events I have today so I don't miss anything and can start my day off prepared. As Danny, I want to see what I need to buy at the store so I don't forget anything. And as Danny, I want to see what tasks need to be done around the house so I can schedule out my day. So those are the overarching features and ideas. And then inside, I have a specific checklist of the different items that satisfy this feature. So for the weather, we need to connect to an API, we need to get the weather info, and we need to display the info to the user. So 3 steps for this one. For the calendar, same thing essentially, connection to Google Cal, get the events for the day, display them to the user. For the store, hopefully this isn't too small. I don't know if I can bump it up. Oh, I can a little bit. Okay, cool. So for the grocery list, we need to create a database. We need to create a model, which a model is essentially is kind of how you link your information to the database. It's essentially saying the information I'm going to put in the database is going to look like this. So your model would be that there's going to be, an item name and an item description. So it's going to essentially connect to the database and tell the database these are the 2 things that are going to be coming in. And then, of course, you can see we need to be able to save items, read items, update, and delete. This, I'm going to change the language just so it's following what we've been talking about with CRUD, just so I keep it the same. So create, read, update, delete, and of course, display everything to the user. And then last one, same thing with our to-do. So I'm going to update this because I just copied it when I made this. A little extra space. So same thing, we need a database for to-do, and I'm going to do 2 separate databases. Just because they are going to be so small, I'm not really worried about them getting like so big because there's 2 of them and that it would slow anything down. They're just going to be tiny. Our model, create, read, update, delete, and display. So I like to do this, then I can come in here and I can check off items as I go. You see that it has a little fun animation. And then as I'm working on it, if I'm in the middle here, I put it in doing. And then when it's done, I put it in done. If you're the kind of person who likes checking boxes, likes that kind of those little sense of accomplishments by like moving things across a board, this would probably be really great for you. If you're not that kind of person and you find this to be tedious, I would still suggest thinking about it, but maybe in your code, you just code out some comments instead. It's not for everyone. Am I going to be using Flask? That's a great question. I'm assuming it's Fabian. I'm so sorry if I mispronounce. I'm terrible with names. I'm so sorry. But am I going to be using Flask? I'm trying to decide still. I'm building it on my own so that I can build it here with you all and not spend so much time debugging and troubleshooting. But the app is going to go on a Raspberry Pi. And so I was looking at Kivy and I was looking at using Flask and doing that with you all so that you all can run it a little bit easier if you wanted to pull it from GitHub and run it. So I might go that route, and then I might, build my own version with Kivy on my own. So I'm leaning towards using Flask just so it makes it a lot easier for you all to be able to pull it and run the program and see it all working, in your browser. So that's the way I'm leaning, but I haven't jumped into Kivy yet because I'm learning it. So if it's not too hard and it doesn't look like it would be really confusing, then I might do that with you all. Oh, thank you. I'm glad I pronounced it correctly. Okay. So I've got my diagram, I've got my Trello board. The next thing would be to get in and start putting stuff down. So for anyone who hasn't used Python before, you can go to python.org/downloads and cool. Just so I make sure it's nice and big because I know not everyone can see so well. So when you go to python.org/downloads, it'll automatically know what system you're on. So if I'm on my Mac, it'll say Mac, and it'll have the right one. Windows, and I believe it has Linux too. Yeah. So you can just hit download Python. This is the latest version, and it will be the one that they recommend for you to download. So if you're going to follow along, go ahead and download Python. We're just going to be doing a little bit of like basic setup stuff today. We aren't actually going to get into like code. So if you don't want to follow along right now and you want to in a couple weeks, totally fine. But I just want to make sure everyone knew where to go. So that's where you go to get your Python. I am using Visual Studio. Lately, it's been kind of my preferred text editor. I've used quite a few of the other ones, but I found Visual Studio to just kind of be the one that I like the best. And that's my opinion. I know there are people out there that love some of the other text editors. But if you're new to coding and you want to follow along, and you're not sure where to start or what a text editor or IDE is, then I would suggest starting here with me on Visual Studio. So this is code.visualstudio.com, and same thing, it'll detect what your system is, and then you just hit this big old blue download button, and it'll get you set up. So yeah, so those are the two things to download before you get started so that you can start working on things. And then, see here, I have my text editor, and I just have a folder called Home Automation App. So that's where we're going to get started. Grab a quick drink. All right, so like I said before, the entry point to our app is going to be app.py. So that's a pretty easy one. App.py. Done. One file complete. I'll do that later. All right, so this is going to, and I'm going to add these code comments in here just for anyone that's new, so you kind of know what these different files are going to be used for. So I wouldn't typically put these in my project, but this is so when anyone, at the end we have a GitHub link to share so that you can download what we build today and get started from there if you want to just like take off on your own. So you'll see these comments in there. It's also for anyone that's, that's new and needs a little more context. So this will be our entry point for the app, which means run this file to make it go. I kind of like doing silly things like that. So it's going to keep doing it. That's fine. Install it if it's going to make you happy. Okay. All right, so I'm making sure I see my thing on the other side. The other big thing for your projects, and this should be for every project that you're especially going to put on GitHub, and especially if you're going to put it in a place that's going to be like your portfolio or something you're going to share with employers, your project needs to have a README file. So readme.md. Okay, and in your README file, there's going to be a couple things that I suggest you should put on your projects, kind of at the bare minimum. You can always go, beyond this if you want. So the first thing is a name. Oop, why is it doing this? I'm used to typing on a Mac lately, and so now when I try and do Command S, I have to remember to do the opposite side of the keyboard for a Control S. So I keep hitting Alt S on accident. There we go. Okay. So then this would be, I'm just going to type, I typed a description. It's already up on the, on GitHub. So I'm just going to put a description here. So it's always good to have a description of your project when you have it up on GitHub so that people know what it is. You may build something and you may, think, Well, if you just run it, you'll know what it is. But a potential employer or a coworker or a friend, whoever you share, that link with, or who stumbles upon it, they won't know just by looking at your code what it is. And sometimes, especially if it's like maybe an HR rep or something like that that's doing hiring and looking through portfolios, they may not even know code. So it's always a good idea, and I highly recommend it, to add a description of what your app is. What is it? Why did you make it? What does it do? All that information in your description will make it 100% more user friendly, and make it easier for people to see it and go, okay, that's what this is. That's what it does. That's really cool. And then if they want to know more, or if they want to download it, they can dig in even more. I have it pulled up on my other screen, so I'm looking to make sure I put in what I did. Okay, so the next thing I added was current features. This is a good way for people to know, again, what your app does. And it's also a place where you could do like current features, and then you could have something like requested or upcoming features, so that people know that you're still working on this project and what to look for in the future. So current features, we have caps lock, daily weather forecast plus next 3 days. I have a big, oh, I'm so used to doing that thing on the Mac too. It's throwing me off today. There we go. The next thing we have is a grocery list. After that, we have a to-do list. And the final feature is a calendar events for the day. Okay. So after that, if you're trying to keep your readmes minimum, or if maybe you're thinking, oh, I should go do this, but I don't want to have to do like paragraphs of stuff for all of my projects to go update them. The last thing, if you want to keep it really minimum, the last thing that I suggest putting in here is running the project. So let people know, especially this is great for new coders, because a lot of times you'll see, these awesome GitHub repos of things that they're like, oh yeah, download this, it's gonna be so awesome. And then, but you get there as a new coder and you're like, what am I supposed to do with it, right? I downloaded it, it's in a zip file, I unzipped it, now what do I do? So adding a way to explain how someone should run the project, or how running it works, helps new coders. They're really appreciative of that, but it also helps potential employers know quickly, just at a glance, to be like, okay, download, I need to run this, and the file's gonna, the program's gonna run. Just makes it easier. So I highly recommend adding that in. One thing you may want to think about is dev versus production. My brain was shutting down there for a second. So dev, or actually let me do the whole word. Development versus production. When you're building an app, you're in development mode. So typically there may be different ways to run a program. If you want to run it in development, so you want to download it and you want to run it in development so that you can add things, change things, move things around. And then there's production, which is what we see on websites and apps and things. This is what you run to just see it and have it working and play with it. And it's going to look like a regular website, regular app. That's production. So my suggestion is to put production first when detailing how to run the project. And then if you want, you don't have to, but adding how you do it in development. So I have a note also A good thing to know, because this is created using the new version of Python. So if you don't have the new version of Python, the code I'm going to write will not work. So that's also something that's good to add into your README. So you'll need Python version 3. I have to run, and then you can detail out your steps. So this is typically going to be something like, oops, download the repo. Why is it getting mad at me? It's my problem peak. There it is. Surrounded by blank lines. Oh, it's... I think maybe also because I have too many spaces here. I have a markdown linter, so it'll do the squiggly lines if my markdown's not in the recommended markdown format. So you're going to download it, you're going to unzip the file, and you're going to run Python, possibly Python 3, app.py in the command line, or in your text editor, depending. And of course, it's not going to like command, so I'm just going to spell it out. There we go. Oops, almost pushed Alt-S again. So that's a quick example of doing your README, kind of like a basic version. There we go. Save it out. The next thing that I'm going to add is super important, especially for apps that are going to be connected to our APIs. Like I talked about before, we have these secret keys, these API keys, and no one but you should know what that key is. So in order to make sure that no one but you is going to know what that API key is, you're going to want a Git Ignore file. Git Ignore. So this is going to be file and folder names here for info you don't want on GitHub. So for example, my API keys, I'm probably going to have something like keys.py. So you can add things to your GitHub file before you've actually created them, and it will still make sure to ignore them. So besides API keys, I also don't want I like to make sure I have a space, my database, because if you're going to, if once we get down the road, we have more code in here, if you're going to pull down my project and run it, you probably don't want my daily to-dos and all that stuff in there when you go to run it. So I'm going to make sure my database stays here, which is probably just going to be a folder called database. And I'm going to hold the to-do and the grocery list inside that folder. And then when we get into code, we're going to work in a virtual environment, which we'll talk more about that probably in 2 weeks. But if we're using Python virtual environment, then we need to make sure we don't use the environment folder. We want that to stay here with us. We don't want to send it to GitHub. So we got our app.py, which is where we're going to start. We got our README, got our Git Ignore. The next couple things are going to be a couple folders. So I'm going to create a modules. This is where I'm going to put our breakdown of all the different sections. So our weather API code stuff. I'm gonna do our calendar. I ran into an issue earlier because it was the same name as something else that I got downloaded. We'll call it gcalendar.py. be our Google Calendar API stuff. We're going to have our to-do.py, to-do list stuff. And we have our grocery.py. It's going to have our grocery list stuff. So these modules that's where I'm going to break down the code for those things. The next piece I'm going to make a folder of. Oops, let me make sure I'm out here. There we go. Our models. So this is going to be what we use to tell the database what information is coming. So we have our to-do model.py. So this is going to be our database. Let it know what the info will be like. And I'm just going to copy this because it's going to be the same thing. We're going to have our grocery model.py. Just going to paste it because it's going to be the same thing. And then the last thing I had here, which is optional as we go through, is creating a folder for our tests. Just going to call it test.py for right now. So let me break these all down. All right, so we have our kind of overall organization of our code. Now, you absolutely don't have to build out all the folders, all the files and everything before you start. You can, create your app.py and then maybe your weather.py and then start working on that and then start adding things as you go. I kind of like to do this. It feels organized. It also helps to remind me that, I have other things that I need to do. Also, one thing that happens a lot to every developer is you're going to run into a spot where something's just going to not work. And you're going to want to throw your keyboard through the screen. And you're just going to be like, I've been working on this for hours and I still don't know what's wrong. So for me, if it's like in the weather thing and I just can't get something working, I'm probably going to be like, you know what? Time out on the weather stuff. Let's just leave that for now. Let's go jump over into the to-dos and let's start working on that. So I think for me, that lets me jump into that a lot easier because the file's already there, but everybody is different. So feel free to do what works best for you. Alrighty. So the last thing that I wanted to show off is and actually let me pull it up over here just so I know. This is on github.com. Cool. Okay, so this is already up on GitHub. So feel free, it's github.com/missmeg/home automation app. So it's already up here. So if you want to try tackling this on your own, if you want to play around with it, feel free. That's why I made this, so that you could do that. Also, if you want to code along, starting in 2 weeks, we're going to start with the weather API, and we're going to do that section first. And we're going to do the back-end stuff first. So we won't be doing the display the information, but we'll be making sure that we get the information that we need from the API. So if you want to join in and code along, then you can just come here. You click on this clone or download, and you can download a zip file of it and start coding along with me in 2 weeks. So the whole file is here, and you can see I have more details on how to download the file. Right now, we haven't talked about pip environment or virtual environments. We're going to talk about that more next week, and then this will kind of all make more sense. So right now, as you can see, There's no code in here, so there's no, running of this program yet. So if you download it, just know that running what's listed out, here is not actually going to do anything because there's no code. Okay. Oh, and I forgot it always does this. Oh, did I forget to save? I did. I just went build happy and I didn't save anything, so that's important. Okay. So starting in 2 weeks, we're going to work on getting the weather information using an API. We're going to get the information for this, and then we're going to make sure we get, the information on if it's sunny, the precipitation, the wind speed, and then the conditions for the next 3 days. So first, we're going to do backend. I like to finish backend before I do front end. That's also my personal preference, just because I don't know. It feels like it's a little flippy floppy for me if I go back end and then I do front end and then I go back end front end. So I like to get all the back end stuff working and then jump over into the front end, because then I feel like I accomplished one monster task of doing the back end. Now I can freely do the front end and tackle that. So we're gonna do the back end first, and then we'll jump into doing the front end. So I will work on creating the stuff so that we can code this next week together. We're definitely going to do the weather, and we will complete that. If it's short, because we're not getting a ton of information, we may do weather plus Google Calendar. And so the weather one that I'm looking at right now, I think I minimized it, so I don't know if I remember what it was called. I think it was... Yes, this is the weather API that I'm going to use next week, and I will also remind you all next week. So don't think, oh my gosh, I need to remember this because I'm never going to see it again. I'll show this again next week, but in order to get your own API key, if you're going to code along, you're going to want to sign up. They have a free account right there, $0, no credit card, no nothing. So you'll want to sign up for your account, and then that way you have an API key so that you can run what we're doing locally on your machine if you want to follow along. And then same thing for the Google. Oops, sorry, I'm going to cough. That just hit me right in the throat. Whew, made my eyes tear up too. So there's information over here. And then same thing, you'll need to, I think it's on the guides. There we go, there it goes. And then you can see it has Python, because we're going to do Python. And then there's some steps here. So I'm probably going to have to do this off screen, because I'm probably have to type in passwords, log in, get a key, and all that stuff. And that's all secret stuff that I can't share with you. So, but as I work on this week, so that we're ready to do it together in 2 weeks, I'll let you know. I'll show you as much as I can before we get to secret stuff. And then, I'll have to let you know that you'll have to take it from there. So, but it does give you steps here that we're going to follow to be able to use the Google Calendar API. So that's easiest way to get here is just to Google search, like I did. Oh, it added a new screen. Google Calendar API, and then of course the other one is weatherstack.com is the ones I'm going to use. So feel free between now and in 2 weeks when we start tackling this together. to check these out, test them out, play around with them on your own. Feel free to do it, have some fun. And then next week we'll get to tackling this out together. So yeah, felt like I just like ran through a bunch of stuff real quick in an hour. So I hope you all enjoyed hanging out with me today. Again, my name is Megan. You can find me in both the Python and the UX design tech degrees. I'm in the Slack channels. I also have a couple workshops and practice sessions in the Treehouse Library that are all design based. If you search by design, you'll find it. And we're going to keep working on this in 2 weeks, and that's when y'all will see me next. So hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you're having fun with all of the content that we're doing here. Feel free to let us know if there's something that you want to see. We'll try our best to see if we can accommodate. We're also trying to see what you guys think, what you guys like. So I hope this is fun. Again, I am from teamtreehouse.com. Awesome place to learn how to code, how to design, and just generally hang out with other cool designers and developers, because there's a great forum and there's great Slack channels. And we would love to have you there. Love to have you join us. Anyways, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Hopefully you all have a beautiful day today or a wonderful evening if you're on the other side of the world. And I'll see you all in 2 weeks. Bye, Treehousers.